Like I said, I became obsessed with trying to figure out how I had contracted HIV. And there were two possibilities. There was a guy I'd been with who had enlarged lymph nodes in his neck. I asked him about them, and he said that it was an allergic reaction to something. We used condoms. And I had figured that in my lifetime, at this time I'm 47 years old, I must have had sex with people who were HIV positive and just not known it, but was protected by the condoms that I used. I'd survived the Brazil years where I was walking through the park and a guy on his bike would ride by and we'd make eye contact, and that would take us into the wooded area of the park where we would get where we would gosh, trying to avoid getting strikes on on YouTube, man. Where we would do our thing. All right? Even if he had HIV, I didn't think that we'd done anything that would have resulted in me contracting it from him. But the more I thought about it, it occurred to me that my last test was at the end of December in 2017. And maybe I'd gotten a false negative because I'd been tested too soon after a potential infection, because there was a place I used to go to in Panama that had naked nights. I like to be naked, okay? Don't judge me. So you'd be naked, and it was a bar, but as are many of these places for gay men, it had cubicles. You could go in and have an intimate encounter. And I had an encounter with a guy, which when he finished, he left immediately. And I remember that there was a smell of semen, but it could have been the smell of the condom as well. So I didn't think much of it. It was only in retrospect that I think I was stealthed. And stealthing is when someone, against your will, without your permission, removes the condom during sex and you do not know about it. Okay? So I think that this is what happened. And that I got this test before I left Panama, but it was too soon after this encounter. And so the result wasn't positive, which would explain why the nurse said that based on the quick response, it seemed as though I had been positive for a while. So I was probably positive for those 2 years. And looking back, I also see symptoms. Of course, with HIV and a weakened immune system, anything could be a symptom, but I remember that my legs were really itchy. There was no rash, but I had really itchy legs, and I also had a thicker than usual layer on my tongue. I had noticed that I could scrape off with my thumbnail. Gross, but true. I had definitely noticed that. But I got to a place where I accepted it as the reality of the situation. There's nothing you can do. And it made me really consider how I never really considered people living with HIV and the possible causes of HIV, because I guess the stigma associated with it is that the person's promiscuous and they're not careful, but there are different ways in which you can contract HIV, and they may not align with that story. Like mine, for example. Again, swear by condom use, and this has happened. It has also resulted in me being unsure of how HIV is contracted, because I'm unsure, for example, about the risk regarding oral sex, because nobody's sucking a D with a condom on it. Like, that's not happening really. And what about if you brush your teeth before you have oral sex? These are things that I considered when I was trying to figure out how I had contracted HIV. But the focus should be less on blame and more on education. I was watching Pose at the time, and I had to stop watching it because it was all about death from AIDS. And a lot of the fear that I had came from outside of me, because I was okay with accepting what is, but I had friends saying, oh, you need to go private, you can't go to this place, because there's a specific place in Barbados that people go for HIV testing and treatment. And instead of decentralizing this treatment, this place exists that everybody then knows about. And so people going to this place are discriminated against and potentially pilloried and insulted and targeted, because if you go to this place, it's assumed that you have HIV. And it's madness. But I will tell you the truth. I've been going to this place and I've never had any issues. People imagine problems. The biggest issue that I've had is that sometimes I see people that I know and they see me back, and it can be a little awkward or uncomfortable. But I also now think that this is another layer of protection, because for somebody to want to be involved with me, they have to be educated and they have to understand how HIV is transmitted, and that since I've been undetectable since 2019 when I started medication, that there's no risk of contracting HIV from me. And it is one of the reasons why I don't mind talking about it right now, so that the more people know, the better. So that it's not a discussion that I have to have, because that as well was an uncomfortable thing. I would rather sometimes not have sex than reveal my status. And remember, the doctor in part 1 told me that it's best not to do so, because in small places like Barbados, people tend to be ignorant, and it can even be dangerous to reveal your status. Somebody I know told me that he revealed it to a potential sexual partner and the person spat in his face. So it's a scary thing to have to tell somebody that you're positive. But I also feel that as two adults, do you have to reveal it? What if the person doesn't ask about it? What if they do ask? Do you still have to reveal it, really? Isn't it your personal business? I mean, living as a positive person in both ways makes you think about all of these things, you know? Because as someone who's undetectable and can't transmit it, do I have to tell people when I'm using a condom, you know? Let me preface this by saying that the majority of my interactions with the nurses has been great. They're extremely helpful, and working under difficult circumstances in terms of being understaffed and with limited resources. But the waiting, man, I feel like there's got to be a better way. I have an annual exam and I show up there and my results have been good, always. So I feel like there needs to be a system where you're told that you don't need to go in. Because for me to go in and sit down for 3 hours just to be told that my results are okay is not the best use of my time. So that would be it for me. And I know that this is a Barbadian tradition in institutions to make them wait, to break them. But that's the one thing I would definitely change. I mean, I can call in for my meds and go and pick them up, which is great. There's still a little wait sometimes, but not nearly as much as you'd have to wait if you didn't call them in. So that's one of the things I don't really look forward to. However, when you're good with your meds, you can come in on an annual basis, which is good. Well, I'll see you in the next video when I'm going to be reflecting upon life with HIV. Okay? I'll see you then. Bye.